Srimad Bhavagatam Canto 11, Chapter 21. Lord Kṛṣṇa's explanation of the Vedic path. There are persons who are unfit for all three of the forms of yoga, karma, jnana, and bhakti. They are inimical to Lord Kṛṣṇa, attached to sense gratification, and are dominated by fruitive activities aimed at fulfillment of material desires. This chapter describes their faults in terms of place, time, substance, and beneficiary of actions. For those who are perfect in knowledge and devotion to the Lord, there are no materially good qualities or faults. But for a candidate endeavoring on the platform of karma to achieve cessation of material life, execution of regular and special fruitive duties is good, and the failure to execute such is evil. That which counteracts sinful reaction is also good for him. For one on the platform of knowledge in the pure mode of goodness, and for one on the platform of devotion, the proper actions are respectively cultivation of knowledge and practice of devotional service consisting of hearing, chanting, and so forth. For both, everything detrimental to their proper actions is bad, but for persons who are not candidates for transcendental advancement, or who are not perfected souls, namely those who are completely inimical to spiritual life, and are devoted exclusively to fruitive work for fulfillment of lusty desires, there are numerous considerations of purity and impurity, and auspiciousness and inauspiciousness. These are to be made in terms of one's body, the place of activity, the time, the objects utilized, the performer, the mantras chanted, and the particular activity. In actuality, virtue and fault are not absolute, but are relative to one's particular platform of advancement. Remaining fixed in the type of discrimination suitable to one's level of advancement is good, and anything else is bad. This is the basic understanding of virtue and fault. Even among objects belonging to the same category, there are different considerations of their purity or impurity in relation to performance of religious duties, worldly transactions, and the maintenance of one's life. These distinctions are described in various scriptures. The doctrine of Varnashram codifies precepts of bodily purity and impurity. With respect to place, purity and impurity are distinguished by such facts as the presence of black deer. In connection with time, there are distinctions of purity and impurity, either in terms of the time itself or in terms of its specific relation with various objects. In connection with physical substances, distinctions of purity and impurity are made in terms of sanctification of objects and words, and by such activities as bathing, giving charity, performing austere penances, and remembering the Supreme Lord. There are also distinctions of the purity and impurity of the performance of actions. When one's knowledge of mantras is received from the lips of the bona fide spiritual master, one's mantra is considered pure, and one's work is purified by offering it unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If the 6 factors of place, time, and so forth are purified, then there is dharma or virtue, but otherwise there is adharma or fault. Ultimately, there is no substantial basis in distinctions of virtue and fault, because they transform according to place, time, beneficiary, and so on. In regard to the execution of prescribed duties for sense gratification, the actual intent of all the scriptures is the subduing of materialistic propensities. Such is the actual principle of religion that destroys sorrow, confusion, and fear, and bestows all good fortune. Work performed for sense gratification is not actually beneficial. Descriptions of such fruitive benefits, offered in various Shrutis, are actually meant to help one gradually cultivate a taste for the highest benefit. But persons of inferior intelligence take the flowery contradictory verses of the scriptures to be the actual purport of the Vedas. This opinion, however, is never held by those in factual knowledge of the truths of the Vedas. Persons whose minds are agitated by the flowery words of the Vedas have no attractions for hearing topics about Lord Hari. It should be understood that there is no inner purport to the Vedas apart from the original personality of Godhead. The Vedas focus exclusively upon the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, because this material world is simply the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. It is by refuting material existence that one gains disassociation from matter. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Yaetan Matpatho Hitva Bhakti Jnana Kriyatmakan Shudran Kamam Schalaihi Pranair Jusantaha Samsarantite. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Those who give up these methods for achieving me, which consist of devotional service, analytic philosophy, and regulated execution of prescribed duties, and instead being moved by the material senses, cultivate insignificant sense gratification, certainly undergo the continual cycle of material existence." Purport. As clearly explained by Lord Kṛṣṇa in the previous chapters, philosophical analysis and also the performance of prescribed duties are ultimately meant for achieving Krishna consciousness, a pure love of God. Devotional service based on hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord directly engage the conditioned soul in the Lord's loving service, and thus is the most efficient means of achieving the Lord. All three processes, however, share a common goal, Krishna consciousness. Now the Lord describes those who, being completely absorbed in material sense gratification, do not adopt any authorized means to achieve the Lord's mercy. Certainly hundreds of millions of unfortunate human beings fit squarely into this category, and, as described here, perpetually suffer the bondage of material existence. Text 2. Sve sveti karya nishta sagunaha parikirtitaha viparyayastu doshaha syat upayoresha nishchayaha. Translation. Steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. Steadiness in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one's position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. Purport. In the previous verse, Lord Kṛṣṇa explained that the path of spiritual progress begins with working without fruitive desires, advances to the stage of realized spiritual knowledge, and culminates in direct engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Here the Lord emphasized that a conditioned soul should not artificially disrupt the natural evolution of his Krishna consciousness by deviating from those duties prescribed by the Lord himself. The lower stage of human life, one is entangled in false identification with the gross material body and desires to execute material fruitive activities based on society, friendship, and love. When such materialistic activities are offered in sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, one becomes situated in Karma Yoga. By regulated sacrifice, one gradually gives up the gross bodily concept of life and advances to the stage of realization of spiritual knowledge, whereby one understands oneself to be an eternal spirit soul completely different from the material body and mind. Feeling relief from the pangs of materialism, one becomes very attached to one's spiritual knowledge, and thus one is situated in the stage of jñāna yoga. As the candidate further advances on the spiritual path, he understands himself to be part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, the Personality of Godhead, Lord Kṛṣṇa. He then sees that his conditional life as well as his spiritual knowledge was obtained from the personality of Godhead, who awards the results of all types of activities, both pious and sinful. By directly engaging in the loving service of the Supreme Lord and understanding oneself to be the Lord's eternal servant, one's attachment evolves into pure love of Godhead. Thus one first gives up the lower stage of attachment to the material body and then subsequently gives up attachment to cultivation of spiritual knowledge. This relieves one of material life. Finally, one recognizes the Lord Himself as the resting place of one's eternal love and fully surrenders to God in full Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna explains in this verse that one who is still attached to the material body and mind cannot artificially give up the prescribed duties of karma yoga. In the same way, one who is a spiritual native just beginning to realize the illusion of material life should not artificially try to think of the Lord's intimate pastimes 24 hours a day, imitating the stage of prema bhakti. Rather, he should cultivate analytic knowledge of the material world, by which one gives up attachment to the material body and mind. In Srimad Bhavagatam we find many analytic descriptions of the material world, and they can free the conditioned soul from false identification with matter. One who has achieved the perfect stage of love of Godhead, however, being freed from all gross and subtle attachments to the material world, may give up the lower stage of karma yoga and jnana yoga and engage directly in the Lord's loving service. In chapter 19, verse 45, Lord Kṛṣṇa states, Guna dosha drishir dosha gunastubhaya varjitaha. One should not see material good and evil within a devotee of the Lord. Indeed, one becomes pious by giving up such mundane conceptions. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that occasionally a native devotee may be polluted by association with those enthusiastically executing fruitive activities and mental speculation. Such a devotee's religious activities may be affected by mundane tendencies. Similarly, an ordinary person who observes the exalted status of a pure devotee sometimes externally imitates the devotee's activities, considering himself to be on the same exalted platform of pure devotion and service. These imperfect practitioners of bhakti yoga are not exempt from criticism, since their fruitive activities, mental speculation, and false prestige are material intrusions in the pure loving service of the Lord. A pure devotee engaged exclusively in the Lord's service should not be criticized, but a devotee whose devotional service is mixed with material qualities may be corrected so that he can rise to the platform of pure devotional service. Innocent persons should not be misled by the mixed devotional service of those not engaged exclusively in the bhakti yoga system, but those unable to fully engage in Krishna consciousness should nevertheless not give up their regular prescribed duties, declaring them to be illusion. For example, one unable to fully engage in pure Krishna consciousness should not give up his family, considering it an illusion, for by doing so he will fall into illicit sex life. Material piety and analytic knowledge of the material world must therefore be cultivated until one comes to the stage of directly practicing Krishna consciousness. Text 3. Shuddhi ashuddhi vidhiyate samanish api vastushu dravyasya vichikitsartham Gunadoshav subhasubhav dharmartham yavaharartham yatrartham iti chanaga. Translation: Asinna Sudhava. In order to understand what is proper in life, one must evaluate a given object within its particular category. Thus, in analyzing religious principles, one must consider purity and impurity. Similarly, in one's ordinary dealings, one must distinguish between good and bad. And to ensure one's physical survival, one must recognize that which is auspicious and inauspicious. Purport: in religious activities, ordinary dealings, and personal survival, one cannot avoid value judgments. Morality and religion are perennial necessities in civilized society. Therefore, distinctions between purity and impurity, piety and impiety, morality and immorality must somehow be ascertained. Similarly, in our ordinary worldly activities, we distinguish between palatable and tasteless food, good and bad business, high class and low class residences, good and bad friends, and so forth. And to ensure our physical health and survival, we must constantly distinguish between what is safe and unsafe, healthy and unhealthy, profitable and unprofitable. Even a learned person must constantly distinguish between good and bad within the material world. But at the same time, he must understand the transcendental position of Krishna consciousness. Despite one's careful calculation of that which is materially healthy and unhealthy, the physical body will collapse and die. Despite careful scrutiny of the socially favorable and unfavorable, one's entire social milieu will vanish with the passing of time. In the same way, great religions arise and disappear in the course of history. Thus, mere religiosity, social and financial expertise, or physical fitness cannot award the actual perfection of life. There is a transcendental good beyond the relative good of the material world. Any sane person accepts the practical and immediate necessity of material discrimination. Yet one must come ultimately to the transcendental stage of Krishna consciousness, where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. Lord Krishna, in his elaborate teachings to Sri Uddhava, is gradually clarifying the transcendental position of Krishna consciousness beyond the endless variety of material good and evil. Text 4. Darshito yammaya charo dharmam utvahatam duram. Translation: I have revealed this way of life for those bearing the burden of mundane religious principles. Purport: ordinary religious principles prescribing innumerable rules, regulations, and prohibitions are undoubtedly a great burden for these bereft of Krishna consciousness. In the first canto of Srimad Bhavagatam it is stated, Bhurini bhuri karmani shrotavyani vibhagashaha. There are countless religious scriptures in the world prescribing countless religious duties. The authorized scriptures are those spoken by the Lord himself or his representatives, as stated in this verse. In the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Kṛṣṇa states, Sarva dharmam parityaja, mam ekam sharanam vraja. One should give up the troublesome burden of mundane piety and directly take to the loving service of the Lord, in which everything is simplified. Lord Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita, Susukham kartuma vyayam, the bhakti yoga process, which depends completely upon the mercy of the Lord, is very joyful and easily performed. Similarly, Lochan Das Thakur sings, Parama karuna pahudijana nitai gora chandra sabhavatara sarasiromani Kevalananda Kanda. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna himself, appeared 500 years ago to distribute the sublime method of chanting the holy names of the Lord. In this way, rather than bearing the burden of artificial austerity, one can directly take to the Lord's service, cleansing one's heart and immediately experiencing transcendental bliss. Those who have taken to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement follow four basic principles: no illicit sex, no eating of meat, fish or eggs, no intoxication, and no gambling. They rise early in the morning, chant Hare Krishna, and spend the day happily engaged in the Lord's service. Those who follow the ritualistic Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, however, are burdened with innumerable regulations, rituals, and ceremonies, which must be personally performed by the worshippers or performed on their behalf by qualified Brahmins. At any moment there is danger of discrepancy, resulting in the total loss of their accumulated piety. Similarly, those on the philosophical path must painstakingly refine, and adjust philosophical categories, a process that generally ends in confusion and hopelessness. The practitioners of mystic yoga undergo grueling penances, subjecting themselves to severe heat and cold, near starvation and so on. All such materialistic persons have personal desires to fulfill, whereas the devotees of the Lord who desire the Lord's pleasure simply depend upon the Lord's mercy and go back home, back to Godhead. In the previous verse, the Lord mentioned that in the material world there are endless distinctions and valid judgments to be made in the course of one's life. A devotee, however, sees Krishna within everything and everything within Krishna, remaining humble, simple, and blissful in the Lord's service. He does not perform elaborate religious ceremonies, nor does he become antisocial or immoral. The devotee simply chants the holy name of Krishna and easily achieves the highest perfection of life. Ordinary persons endeavor for bodily maintenance, but a devotee is automatically maintained by the Lord's mercy. A devotee's ordinary dealings, and religious activities are also all dedicated to the personality of Godhead. Thus there is nothing but Krishna in a devotee's life. Krishna gives all protection and maintenance, and the devotee gives everything to Krishna. This natural liberated situation is called Krishna consciousness. It is the ultimate absolute good, as explained by the Lord throughout this canto. Text 5. Bhumi Ambu Agni Anil Lakasha Bhutanam Panchadatavaha Abrahmastava Radinam Sharira Atma Samyutaha. Translation: Earth, water, fire, air, and ether are the five basic elements that constitute the bodies of all conditioned souls. From Lord Brahma himself down to the non-moving creatures, these elements all emanate from the one personality of Godhead. Purport: all material bodies are composed of different proportions of the same five gross elements, which emanate from the one personality of Godhead and cover the living entities, who are all in the Jiva category. The concepts of good and bad depend on the choice of the Supreme Lord and not on inherent qualitative differences in material objects. A Krishna-conscious person ultimately sees all material phenomena as one. The devotee's good behavior, intelligence, discrimination, and artistic sense within the material world are all based on the will of God. The material elements, being emanations from the Supreme Lord, are ultimately all non-different. However, advocates of mundane piety fear that if the material duality of good and bad is minimized, people will become immoral or anarchistic. Certainly, the impersonal and atheistic philosophy preached by modern scientists, in which material variety is reduced to mere mathematical descriptions of molecular and atomic particles, leads to moral society. Although both material science and Vedic knowledge uncover the illusion of material variety and reveal the ultimate oneness of all material energy, only the devotees of Lord Kṛṣṇa are surrendered to the supreme absolute piety of God's will. Thus they always act for the benefit of all living entities, accepting material variety in the Lord's service, according to the Lord's desire. Without Krishna consciousness or God consciousness, people cannot understand the absolute position of spiritual goodness. Instead, they artificially try to construct this civilization based on interdependent self-interest on the material platform. Such a foolish arrangement easily collapses, as evidenced by widespread social conflict and chaos in the modern age. All members of a civilized society must accept the absolute authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then social peace and harmony will not rest on the flimsy, relative platform of mundane piety and sin. Text 6. Vedana nama rupani Vishamani sameshvapi dhatu shuddhava kalpyanta etesham svarta siddhaye. Translation: My dear Uddhava, although all material bodies are composed of the same five elements and are thus equal, the Vedic literatures conceive of different names and forms in relation to such bodies so that the living entities may achieve their goals of life. Purport: the words Nama, Rupani, Vishamani refer to the system of Varnashram Dharma, in which members of human society are designated according to four social and four occupational divisions. Those dedicated to intellectual or religious perfection are called Brahmins. Those dedicated to political perfection are called Kshatriyas. Those dedicated to financial perfection are called Vaishyas. And those dedicated to eating, sleeping, sex, and honest work are called Shudras. Such propensities arise from the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance, because the pure soul is not material, intellectual, ambitious for power, enterprising, or servile. Rather, the pure soul is always absorbed in loving devotion to the Supreme Lord. If the various propensities of a conditioned soul are not engaged in the Varnashram system, they will certainly be misused, and thus that person will fall down from the standard of human life. The Vedic system is designed by the Lord so that conditioned souls may pursue their individual achievements and at the same time advance toward the ultimate goal of life, Krishna consciousness. Just as a doctor deals with a crazy man by speaking to him sympathetically in terms of his false conception of life, one who understands the Vedic literature engages the living entities according to their illusory identification with the elements of matter. Although all material bodies are composed of the same material elements and are thus qualitatively identical, as described here by the word Sameshu, the Vedic social system Varnashram is created to engage all human beings in Krishna consciousness according to their various degrees of material identification. The Absolute Good is the Supreme Lord Himself, and that which approaches the Supreme Lord becomes similarly good. Because the sun is the source of heat within this world, an object that approaches the sun becomes hotter and hotter until it merges into fire. In the same manner, as we approach the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead, we automatically become surcharged with absolute goodness. Although this knowledge is the real basis of the Vedic literature, mundane piety is enjoined and sin is prohibited so that one can gradually become to the platform of material goodness, whereupon spiritual knowledge becomes visible. Text 7. Deshakaladi-bhavanam Vishtunam mama sattamam Gunadosha vidhiyate Niyamartam hi karmanam. Translation: O Saint Uddhava, in order to restrict materialistic activities, I have established that which is proper and improper among all material things, including time, space, and all physical objects. Purport: the word niyamartam, in order to restrict, is significant in this verse. A conditioned soul falsely identifies with his material senses and thus considers anything giving immediate satisfaction to the body to be good, and anything inconvenient or disturbing to be bad. By higher intelligence, however, one recognizes long-term self-interest and danger. For example, medicine may be immediately bitter, but by calculating one's long-term interest, one accepts the bitter medicine to cure a disease that is not immediately troublesome, but ultimately fatal. Similarly, Vedic literature restricts the sinful propensities of human beings by establishing what is proper and what is improper among all the objects and activities of the material world. Because everyone must eat, the Vedas prescribe foods in the mode of goodness and not those which are sinful, such as meat, fish, and eggs. Similarly, one is advised to live in a peaceful and pious community and not in association with sinful persons, nor in an unclean or turbulent environment. By designating and restricting the exploitation of the material world, Vedic knowledge gradually brings a conditioned soul to the platform of material goodness. At that stage, one becomes eligible to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and enter the transcendental stage of life. It should be remembered that such mere eligibility does not constitute actual qualification. Without Krishna consciousness, mere mundane piety can never qualify a conditioned soul to go back home, back to Godhead. Within this world, we are all infected by false pride, which must be diminished through submission to the Vedic injunctions. One who is completely engaged in the loving service of the Lord need not adopt these preliminary methods, for he directly contacts the personality of Godhead through the spontaneous process of surrender. In the previous verse, the Lord explained why Vedic literatures assign different values to the bodies of different living entities, and here the Lord explains the Vedic value system in regard to the material objects that interact with these bodies. Text 8. Akrishna sarodeshanam abrammanyo shuchir bhavet Krishna saropi asha ovira kikatasam skritirinam. Translation. Among places, those bereft of the spotted antelope, those devoid of devotion to the Brahmins, those possessing spotted antelopes but bereft of respectable men, provinces like Kikata, and places where cleanliness and purificatory rites are neglected, where meat-eaters are prominent or where the earth is barren, are all considered to be contaminated lands. Purport. The word Krishnasara refers to the spotted antelope, whose hide is used by brahmacharis while residing in the ashram of the spiritual master. Brahmacharis never hunt in the forest, but rather accept skins from those animals already deceased. Deceased. The skin of the black or spotted antelope is also used as a garment by those receiving instruction in the execution of Vedic sacrifice. Therefore, since sacrifice cannot be properly performed in areas bereft of such creatures, these places are impure. Furthermore, although the inhabitants of a particular place may be expert in performing fruitive activities and ritualistic sacrifices, if they are inimical to the devotional service of the Lord, such a place is also polluted. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that previously the provinces of Bihar and Bengal were bereft of devotional service to the Lord and were considered impure. Then great Vaishnavas such as Jayadeva appeared in these territories, converting them into holy places. The word Ashavira indicates those places without Suviras, respectable saintly persons. Ordinarily, a person who obeys the state laws is considered a respectable citizen. In the same way, one who strictly obeys the law of God is considered to be a cultured or decent man, Suvira. The place where such intelligent persons reside is called Sauviram. Kikata refers to the modern state of Bihar, which traditionally has been known as a territory of uncivilized men. Even in such provinces, however, any place where saintly persons gather is considered to be holy. On the other hand, a province of generally respectable persons is immediately polluted by the presence of sinful men. Asamskrita indicates lack of external cleanliness as well as the absence of purificatory ceremonies for internal cleanliness. Srila Madhvacharya quotes from the Skanda Purana as follows: religious persons should reside within an 8-mile radius of rivers, oceans, mountains, hermitages, forests, spiritual sites, cities, or places where the Shalagram Shila is found. All other places should be considered kikata or contaminated. But if even in such contaminated places black and spotted antelope are found. One may reside there as long as sinful persons are not also present. Even if sinful persons are present, if the civil power rests with respectable authorities, one may remain. Similarly, one may dwell wherever the deity of Vishnu is duly installed and worshipped. The Lord here elaborates upon the theme of piety and sin, which are based on purity and impurity. As pure and contaminated places of residence are described here. Text 9. Karmanyo gunavan kalo dravyatah swataiva va yato nivartate karma sadosho karmakaha smrtaha. Translation. A specific time is considered pure when it is appropriate either by its own nature or through achievement of suitable paraphernalia for the performance of one's prescribed duty. The time which impedes the performance of one's duty is considered impure. A specific time is considered pure when it is appropriate either by its own nature or through achievement of suitable paraphernalia for the performance of one's prescribed duty. That time which impedes the performance of one's duty is considered impure. Purport. Having discussed pure and impure places, the Lord now discusses different qualities of time. Certain times, such as the Brahma Muhurta, the last few hours before sunrise, are always auspicious for spiritual advancement. Other times, not auspicious in themselves, become so by achievement of material prosperity that facilitates one's mission in life. Political, social, or economic disturbances that obstruct the execution of one's religious duties are considered inauspicious times. Similarly, a woman is considered contaminated just after childbirth or during her menstrual period. She cannot perform ordinary religious activities at such times, which are therefore inauspicious and impure. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains that the most auspicious of all times is the moment one achieves the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one neglects the loving service of the Lord, being carried away by sense gratification, he is certainly living in most inauspicious times. Therefore, that moment in which one achieves the association of the Supreme Lord or the Lord's pure devotee is the most auspicious time, whereas the moment of losing such association is most inauspicious. In other words, the perfection of life is simple Krishna consciousness, by which one transcends the dualities of time and space caused by the three modes of material nature. Text 10. Dravyasya shuchi ashuchi cha dravyena vachanena cha samskarena thakalena mahatvalpatayathava. Translation. An object's purity or impurity is established by application of another object, by words, by rituals, by the effects of time, or according to relative magnitude. An object's purity or impurity is established by application of another object, by words, by rituals, by the effects of time, or according to relative magnitude. Purport. Clothes is purified by application of clean water and contaminated by application of urine. The words of a saintly Brahmana are pure, but the sound vibration of a materialistic person is contaminated by lust and envy. A saintly devotee explains actual purity to others, whereas a non-devotee makes false propaganda that leads innocent people to commit polluted, sinful activities. Pure rituals are those meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while materialistic ceremonies are those that lead their followers into materialistic and demonic activities. The word samskarena also indicates that the purity or impurity of a particular object is ascertained according to the regulations of ritualistic performances. For example, a flower to be offered to the deity must be purified with water. Flowers or food cannot be offered to the deity, however. if they have been contaminated by being smelled or tasted before the offering. The word kalyan indicates that certain substances are purified by time and others contaminated by time. Rainwater, for example, is considered pure after 10 days' time, and after 3 days in cases of emergency. On the other hand, certain foods decay in time and thus become impure. Mahatva indicates that great bodies of water do not become contaminated, and alpataya means that a small amount of water can easily become polluted or stagnant. In the same way, a great soul is not polluted by occasional contact with materialistic persons, whereas one whose devotion to God is very small is easily carried away and put into doubt by bad association. In terms of combination with other substances, and in terms of speech, ritual, time, and magnitude, the purity and impurity of all objects can be ascertained. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that impure decayed food is certainly forbidden for normal persons, but is permissible for those who have no other means of subsistence. Text 11. Shaktya shaktya thava buddhya samritya chayadat atmane akham kurvanti yatha deshavasthanu sharatha. Translation. Impure things may or may not impose sinful reactions upon a person, depending on that person's strengths or weakness, intelligence, wealth, location, and physical condition. Impure things may or may not impose sinful reactions upon a person, depending on that person's strength or weakness, intelligence, wealth, location, and physical condition. Purport. The Lord has described the purity and impurity of different places, times, and material objects. According to the laws of nature, that which is impure contaminates a particular person in accordance with that person's situation, as described here. For example, on certain occasions, such as a solar eclipse or just after childbirth, one must restrict the intake of food according to ritualistic injunctions. One who is physically weak, however, may eat without being considered impious. Ordinary persons consider the 10 days following childbirth to be most auspicious, whereas one who is learned knows that this period is actually impure. Ignorance of the law does not save one from being punished, but one who consciously commits sinful activities is considered most fallen. Concerning opulence, samriti, worn out, dirty clothing, or a messy residence are considered impure for a rich man, but acceptable for one who is poor. The word desha indicates that in a safe and peaceful place, one is obligated to strictly perform religious rituals, whereas in a dangerous or chaotic situation, one may be excused for occasional negligence of secondary principles. One who is physically healthy must offer obeisances to the deities, attend religious functions, and execute his prescribed duties, but a young child or sickly person may be excused from such activities as indicated by the word avastha. Ultimately, as Srila Rupa Goswami states, Anya vilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam anukulena Krishnanushīlanam bhaktiruttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Kṛṣṇa favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. Bhaktirasamrita Sindhu. One should accept everything which is favorable for the devotional service of Lord Kṛṣṇa and reject whatever is unfavorable. One must learn the process of serving God from the bona fide spiritual master, and thus always maintain one's existence pure and free from anxiety. In general, however, when considering the relative purity and impurity of material things, all of the above-mentioned factors must be calculated.